easy for him to do. This is somebody who lived out of one of these customer relations systems. So basically, he was a technical support engineer for a high-tech firm, and he was basically was using these issue trackers to keep track of everything that he needed to do for people, but also for himself. So he thought of the world in terms of issues and follow-ups and to-dos and things like that. I bet he never forgot a birthday or an anniversary, right? And so these are sort of the way that people use tools to fit their world model was very interesting. So just in addition to looking at the artifacts that we collected, we also asked people about why they did things. And again, the speed effort came up again, and the availability, as well as social acceptability. Sometimes people still don't like it when you're using your laptop in front of their faces. Doesn't bother me. And then the wouldn't fit problem. And visibility and reminding, there was a great number of people, both engineers and administrative assistants, who said, as soon as it's filed in Outlook, I completely forget about it. And there's no way to have it just kind of there. And then finally, this people wanting to do it their way. So as sort of closing note of this study for the moment, I wanted to say that we noticed a lot of people doing this to-do text kind of behavior, where you accumulate in a text editor of your choice. You come up with your own system of organization where you put your notes of how to use Perl and PS and all these things, and then this person devised his mechanism of separating notes in his to-do text. And this person was very happy with their system, right? And so that made us ask, well, what does this afford? You can handle mutants, right? You can write things quickly. You can paste anything into it, right? So what if we designed a tool to let people do just that, right? Would it help other people who haven't discovered this to-do texting? And maybe could we provide them additional functionality as well? And this leads us to chapter 2, which talks about Listit. And Listit is a happy Firefox plugin that simply sits on the side of your browser. And all it does is it lets you create notes. You can rearrange them, you can delete them. I can show you a demo, do that afterwards. Greg Vargas and I designed this in 2008 and deployed it. And now we have quite a few people using it, which is great. But the main purpose of why we developed this thing was to spy on people, was to use this as a microscope to understand pen, right? So this tool is nothing fancy, right? It doesn't read your mind. It doesn't do anything MIT, right? It just sits there and takes notes, right? Right. But the purpose was so that we could collect a corpus of pen use. Now, this is a problem, because you put a note-taking tool out to the world, and you say, MIT developed this note-taking tool, and it's going to make your life better, and then reporters go wild, and you end up with this kind of growth curve. Bam! In one note, and your server crashes. And so we got coverage from MIT Tech Talk, and suddenly, for some reason, we found out people actually read Tech Talk. I didn't know that. But we got contacted by Forbes and the New York Times, and in 1 month we grew from basically nobody to having 15,000 users, and then we've been sort of slowly crawling. Apparently the media has a very short-term memory, long-term memory, long-term memory. So they keep rediscovering the tool, and they're like, "Whoa, I found this great tool." So, so we got second coverage of the New York Times, never heard of it before, and then it was reblogged. We got a bunch of French users who discovered this because they don't read New York Times via Le Monde, and then just last week, it took 2 years for us to go through the Mozilla add-ons process. It's slightly bitter, but we just got through it. So we're on a positive slope again. So what do people's notes look like? What did they write? So this is, I just have to say, they're slightly censored, but I tried to preserve as much of it as possible. In other words, all the words that names have replaced with names of the same number of letters. But if you try to go and look up some of these references and try to spy, they won't do it. So this is what people took. So this is a random sampling. I didn't try to select things particularly, but so we noticed that there's lots of short notes, and we'll analyze them in various ways next. But just wanted to first show you. So what we did was we took these notes, and we wanted to do a similar kind of analysis to what we did with information scraps to see if the tool is solving information scraps problem, right? So what we did was we first selected 300 notes, had 3 coders. I may have been one of them. And we sat down and we tried to derive the set of categories. And we came up with 48 categories that seemed to reflect that set of 300 notes. And then we chose another 540. We completely threw those notes away. We didn't delete them, but we chose another set, and then we independently categorized them. And we ended up with a count that looks like this, which is very similar to what we saw in the information scout study. We ended up with an agreement of 0.714 Cohen's kappa, which basically symbolizes the amount of times that we were able to get a consistent categorization for a particular note for these 540 notes. This is considered moderately strong, so we're doing pretty well. And examples of these categories include, of course, a to-do, and we had to define them precisely because a lot of things feel like they could stand for to-dos, but we defined a to-do to be a note that starts with a verb or that explicitly says to-do in it, okay? And then we broke down the other things, like there are lots of noun notes that were like laundry, probably a to-do, but we called that a thing. We came up with nomenclature, and then we stuck with it. So as long as we were consistent throughout, it was okay. The second thing that we immediately tried to do was determine exactly how much time people are spending writing these notes down, and this blew us away entirely. And that people write, so this is seconds on the x-axis, and this is the number of notes that fell into that number of seconds required to take the note, right? And this time is counted from the moment they click to type, compose, and hit save. That's all you need to do to save a note and list it. There's nothing else. So that's why and we noticed that basically there are some notes that were taken in a second, but the vast majority were taken in 3 seconds. The median here is 7.4 seconds, so half the mass is 7.4, and then you end up with this long tail of people taking their time. But 94% of the notes were taken in less than 60 seconds. If we compare this to Microsoft Outlook, this is, you can do your informal calculation, but this is 8, 10, sometimes 12 times faster than Outlook, right? So the time it takes for you to add a new calendar event, fill out all those little fields and hit OK. Right? And so this is an alarm, right? A warning sign that, speed is important and people are just blazing when they can. Right? Length, things are very short. So this is the number of words. Most things were 1 word. Laundry, or a phone number, something. So, which could lead to problems later looking at it later on. And so, yes, number of number of lines. So again, the distribution is very sort of exponential-like skewed, and so we end up with these medians that are, medians are a better reflection than the mean, of course, because the mean will get all skewed by the long tail. But we end up with a median of 4 lines per note and 48 characters per note. And the characters is somewhat misleading because there are a lot of, as we see, there are a lot of bookmarks. So URLs are a variable length. There are some really long URLs, and so that's inflating the number of lengths, number of characters.
What's that green line?
Oh, the green line are characters. That looks funny.
What does
the green line is nothing. The green line is just an illusion. It's a predictor artifact. Okay. Well, where are you? Oh, no. No blame. So going back to this, so we did a forms analysis, right? We categorized the surface forms of these things. But if we look at them, again, we see that it's likely that a lot of these notes are designed for the same purpose. I apologize for people who are colorblind in here. So I've just colored red a number of notes like these, which all seem to be probably to remind you to do something, right? You're going to ask your camera something? No, they're probably ask somebody about a camera. Teapot power strip, probably something to not forget to bring or to buy. Soy latte Java. And so that's one set of notes. Whereas some of these other ones are likely to be things that you might want to look up later, right? So egg stain removal, you may have had a disaster, and this is a reminder to clean it up. But it's also possible that in case you have the disaster later, that this is a reference item, and some of these are clearly reference items, right? But we also have some of these other ones which are kind of interesting. This gas one here, it looks like someone was record keeping, right? They were maybe keeping track of the amount of gas they were spending, or gas prices or something, we don't know. And then these two are also kind of interesting in that they, perhaps on this one they were actually shopping and trying to make a decision between two types of shoes. And this one they were probably trying to figure out the crossword puzzle clue or something. And so there are notes that reflect sort of work in progress of thinking about something, a decision that you have to make. And then finally we end up with these copied and pasted blobs of stuff from the web, or we end up with a bunch of these things that are like my favorite movie, my favorite video clip. These are the great lyrics that I just want to hang on to. And so this led us to derive sort of a second layer of categorization above the forms, which we call roles. Okay? And these roles are defined as follows. This, again, we followed a coding protocol to do this in the same way and devised these five roles. Memory triggers, again, the things that are supposed to remind you to do something. Reference items, something that contains a piece of information that we're probably going to use later for a specific purpose. External cognition, these things that you're writing through and thinking about as you're writing. Record-keeping notes, people keep track of the amount of miles that they've run or the calories that they're taking in or how much money they're spending. Personal archive, this stuff that you just want to hang on to because it's awesome or for other reasons. And so once we came up with this second level categorization, we asked, well, what do the notes in each category look like, and how are they used? So we went and coded 600 notes, again, 3 coders, and we ended up with 473 notes that we kept. There were lots of test notes we threw out. And we assigned them to more than one role if deemed necessary. So if you ended up with a note that said, call Joe Plumber 617 blah blah blah, then we would put that as potentially a to-do item and a reference, right, in case you need to call him again, right? You have his number. And so then we looked at the overlap. So we ended up with, first of all, this is the number of notes in each category that we experienced. We have most of the notes were memory triggers, but they overlapped heavily with reference items. So this is the percentage of memory triggers that were also reference items. And then we also correlated them with the forms. So most of the reference items fell, the memory triggers fell, not surprisingly, in to-do bucket, which, remember, this was the definition we came up with for notes that started with a verb or contained the word to-do. Okay, so these are the concrete lower-level taxonomy that we just talked about. And we ended up with this relationship. So personal archive had lots of copy and pasted things, some jokes, some quotes, and some ideas. And that seemed to go with our intuition pretty well. Then we wanted to look at what are the statistics, what do these things look like? And we see that memory triggers are, in fact, significantly shorter, and they are also deleted significantly more frequently than other things, too, without that much of a surprise. When you get done with it, you get rid of it. Reference items are deleted less likely, and they are longer than average. And personal archives are longer, although this is not significant. I think the variance is really high there. And journal things are sort of in the middle and deleted less often. Are people following me okay? All right. So this leads us to the following observation, right? In traditional PIM, we have these tools that are like my to-do manager, my bookmark manager, these things. And they're designed for one particular sort of type of use, either being a reminder, or being a reference item, or being an external cognition tool, for example. But instead, what we observed is we have this sort of continuous landscape of things where you end up with these forms that often overlap in 2 or 3 different areas. So this is me being happy with Microsoft Paint. I mean, I placed these manually, but I wanted to illustrate that instead of these one-to-one relationship, we end up with more of a continuous landscape. And this is the kind of, in order to have PIM tools address this kind of continuity, we need to really rethink how we manage our information. So this is, the next thing I want to briefly talk about is how people used it over 2 years. So this was a visualization that Wolf and I came up with for basically showing the use of Listed over the entire 2 years of its deployment. So this is a person who was an early adopter